I think if you're lucky, you'll get to a point in life where you're no longer paralyzed by fears of what might happen if you tell the truth. A point where you're more motivated by what it might cost you if you don't. I'm feeling pretty lucky right now. You met me in the midst of many things. Shedding skin, sprout wings, looking at life as a spiritual being through a human lens, having conversations with God about so many things. This show is your invitation. The Poet God is the conversation. Whatever brought you here, I'm grateful that you would lend me your ear. Can't promise that everything I say will be easy to hear, but I can promise my heart is ready to share. I'm Akil Johnson, and as you listen to this show, you'll understand better why I call it the Poet God. So, when I was about 13 years old, I began to understand that the process of writing poetry and poetic essays was very much a spiritual experience for me. I never felt that I was solely the author of anything I wrote. I've referred to my work as the results of conversations with God because that's what the experience has been, and I have been saved in so many ways for it. One question that I'm frequently asked by readers is, how long did it take to write that? Or they ask about what the inspiration was behind it. And the answer that never changes is there's a place with no address, undetectable by GPS, that I can't find my way to unless I'm called. And once I'm called, I'm there with this magnificent presence. And I go to that place willing to give, willing to receive. And when I wrote my book, Lies I Never Quite Believed, I was there for a long time. I felt haunted by this spiritual presence I call God to finish what was, up until then, the longest literary assignment of my life. Till this day, it has always been that way. Another way I like to explain it is it's like a heightened awareness and clarity of the spiritual forces or force around me. I remember in the beginning, it wasn't as clear to me. Back in 1995, as a seventh grader who recently transferred from junior high school 210 to 57, the difference being between the two, the difference between the two was that at 210, I didn't have to give my lunch away every day. Didn't have to run home to escape freshman day. Although 57 wasn't heaven in comparison, this was still a school in the hood. And the difference was that our principal refused to allow our school to be run by the hood. His name was Mr. Robert Norris, and he made his vision a clear one. One morning, when he called a school-wide meeting, we all wondered who was in trouble this time. Our school was filled with many troubled kids, but trouble lived right outside those doors. And it took every member of that staff to maintain an environment where students could forget about the stress of the streets, if even just for a little while. And sometimes they were successful. Sometimes they were not. I knew that burden rested on Mr. Norris's shoulders when he walked into the auditorium that morning. And standing where he stood, many times, he said a student had written him an anonymous letter. He was holding it in his hand. And in it, he said there were some things he hoped we would come to understand. We all wondered what could be so special about this letter. I mean, he called the whole school down in the auditorium for it. And as he read, the letter said, "Dear Mr. Norris, oh, do we have a school? Or do we have a place where all the children rule? Oh no, let's take action. Let's not let them rule. Let's exercise our right to have a better school." And as he read on, for there was so much more to read, I saw thousands of my fellow students erupt in just a mixture of emotions inspired by that literary seed. Something special was taking place. Something I saw the evidence of on each student's face. It was the moment I first knew what the power of words could do. They could be a light in our darkest hour, turning our pain into power. No one knew the author of the letter Mr. Norris read that day, except for the teacher who delivered it and swore she would never say. I couldn't risk standing and addressing the crowd. But there I was. I sat there terrified, hoping that no one would ever find out that those were my thoughts being read out loud. Anonymity was the only option to ensure my safety in that very hostile environment that inspired all the things I felt I had to say. All the things that I had to say as the author of the letter Mr. Norris read on that fateful day. We'll be right back after these messages. I am so excited to be a part of the wonderful world of podcasts, and to celebrate, I'm giving away a copy of my book, Lies I Never Quite Believed, which averages 5 stars on Amazon and iBooks. Now, a drawing will be held after each episode of Season 1. All you have to do to enter is subscribe, rate, and review this podcast on whatever platform you happen to be listening on. And then send me a screenshot at poetgodmail@gmail.com. That's poetgodmail@gmail.com. This giveaway is only eligible for listeners living in the United States of America. When I think back about that boy that I was, that boy who my grandmother nicknamed Kilo, I feel the whole gamut of emotions. I remember his pain like it was yesterday. Every wound and every reason behind why he was wounded. Every time he fought the feeling of not wanting to be here anymore. I thought a lot about what I would tell him if I could. So I wrote a letter. 1 became 2, and 2 became a few. And through this show, I'll share a little bit of those letters with you. And I also like to know what you would say to your Kilo, what you would have liked your younger self to know. I'd love to hear what you guys' thoughts and feelings are about those messages that you would like to send back in time if you could to your younger self. At the beginning of the show, I told you how lucky I feel to be at this point in my life. I have so much to celebrate and so much to appreciate. And throughout the shows to come, we will talk about all of that. But I want to tell you a little bit about a time when I didn't always feel so lucky. A time when I didn't always feel loved. It was when depression was an emperor I could not rise above. There came a time where it hurt so much for so long, I stopped feeling anything at all. When you're dead inside, it's so much easier to answer the phone when death calls. But that was a lie. I never really died. But when your skies are gray, it certainly feels that way. It took me what it felt like forever to find my way. I had many rivers to cross, many tolls to pay.
For most people, the new year is cause for celebration, but for some, this year is cause for concern. Concern that we've only got a year left on the planet. You've probably heard this, that according to an ancient Mayan prophecy, the world will end in late
2012, when the world was supposed to come to an end, I wrote a book, the one I mentioned earlier, called Lies I Never Quite Believed. It wouldn't be a stretch to surmise that every lie was a river. The experience of writing that book alone was a labor of love. It was a feat to reach so deep, to relive so many experiences like the one I shared earlier about Mr. Norris. It was challenging, but necessary. Because in the end, it was the beginning of a new me. I don't think you can chart the course for a brand new future unless you properly deal with your history. The subtitle, The Emancipation of Akil Johnson, signified the end of many things, the beginning of others. Unknowing that I'm not alone, I stand with thousands of others. So when I sat down to write these letters to Kilo, I realized that there was so much I wanted my younger self to know. The following is an excerpt from that very first letter. You little boy with those brown eyes filled with so much depth. They often reach deeper than the words you speak. I couldn't see the beauty then of those two big front teeth. I'd have fought the urge to cover them along with your smile if the beauty of it wasn't lost on me for such a long while. I know that from where you sit, you only have a certain point of view, but life will change that, as it is meant to do. Don't fear change. It's life's way of replenishing the old with the new. And it is happening on every level of life, both within and outside of you. You must know that it is the way of man to fear what he does not understand. And because of fear, he will stand with the crowd and be led by their choices while ignoring the conviction of his own voice. Although it may be the nature of man to be guided by the fears of what he doesn't understand, fears and falsehoods peddled by the majority, further instilled by those in positions of authority. This, however, is not the man you will be. That's not what I'm telling you, but what you have been showing me. God has a different path for you, though it be rocky because it's traveled by few. It is the path of faith. God is most pleased with us when we become awake to our purpose, awake to its plight, awake to answer the call of living a purpose-driven life. We'll be right back after these messages. I knew I had to find a way to create this podcast. As all creators know, it can be a long process to bringing something that you love to life. You ask yourself the question, how can I fail? How can I fail when I must do this for my soul to exhale? Late nights, internal fights. It all seems like a small price to pay. if I can go to sleep satisfied at the end of the day. And that's why I'm committed to leaving it all on the table, to making this podcast a reflection of everything I am able to give. Because I want to see this dream live. Now you can be a part of making that vision a reality by making a small monthly donation to help sustain the future of this podcast. Apple Podcast listeners can click details at the bottom of each episode to find the Become a Supporter of this podcast link, or go directly to the support page at anchor.fm/thepoetgod/support. That's anchor.fm/thepoetgod/support. Thank you so much for empowering independent creators like me. So the theme of season 1 of The Poet God can be summed up in 2 words. Dear Kilo, I want to speak not only to my own inner child, but he or she within you held captive for such a long while. We have allowed others to have more than their due. What they have stolen, they have replaced with untruths. Who's going to tell the stories we never had the courage to tell? Who's going to amplify the voices screaming inside because we've given away our power to decide? But I, for one, am reclaiming my time. So this season, like this contract, this is for Kilo. Please sign on the dotted line below. Go where lies tend to flow. And when you arrive, tell every truth you know. Go where they are most protected. Assess the collective. Then offer a different perspective. When you tire from the fears they entertain, retire to a place where faith remains. Acquire the things you need for change. Look into the mirror. There's an image you need to rearrange. Look even deeper. There's a soul that needs story. There's a heart that needs exploring. There's a truth that needs unblurring. There's a power you must see. And it's deep in your vulnerability. So let it free. Let the walls cease to be. They will become bridges over rivers you must cross. Tears will pay the tolls for the relationships that will be lost. Freedom has a cost. You've cried enough tears for a lifetime. Kilo died believing that all the world had to offer was unkind. That all he had to offer was a fun time to sexual predators of all kinds. But I'm here now, in case you didn't know, ready to amplify a truth he couldn't show, ready to break through this tomb, ready to rise for those gone too soon. This fortress, which has been a prison for many things, will be nothing more than ashes on many wings. May the birds carry the message. May it be clear. There's something different now in the air. I'm Akil Johnson, the Poet God. Thank you for listening.